Hey everybody, Ben here for the Bonehead podcast and welcome to Print to Pitch. This is our series where we go and have a look at everything to do with 3D printing in Blood Bowl. Whether it's teams, whether it's accessories, whether it's big guys, star players, and even stuff that has no right being involved with Blood Bowl but works really well for Blood Bowl. And today we are going to have a look at the third team from Torchlight now. Now this is a Patreon slash My Mini Factory Tribes. They've done Dwarves, they've done Khemri, and now they've done a pretty cool Amazon team. So we're going to have a look at the STLs, have a look at the value and what you get, and then most importantly of all, we're going to have a look at some 3D printed models. Okay, so this is available on My Mini Factory. Now you can buy the team as a whole thing for $23, or you can back their tribes. So it's about, I don't know, £6. It's between the $6 to $10 amount. Anyway, I back them every month, and they do a team every month, very similar to things like Punga and stuff like that. So this month they've worked on the Field Maidens team, which is a very Norse-themed Amazon team, which made me quite excited because actually that means that they are pretty flexible. I like the style. It's kind of Skyrim, but Skyrim meets Vikings basically. This is an all-female team. The proportions are very sensible. They're a little bit true scale, as in they're quite tall for what they are, but again, it works well with the theme and the size. So the set has 4 blitzers, 7 linewomen, 2 catchers, 1 thrower, and a shaman. Now these are 3D models, so these are STLs. They do come pre-supported, which is amazing, and they are individual now as well, which means you can chuck as many of them as you like on the plate, which is very useful. And the cool thing about 3D printed stuff is you can just clone it, you can just mirror it. So even though there's 1 thrower, if you wanted 2 throwers, you could have them both facing different directions. And because of and we'll have a look at this in a second, because of the sculpts of the catchers, they make perfect throwers if you want to run throwers anyway. So let's have a look at some of the sculpts, because that is why we are here. So this is the whole team, so you can see all the different sculpts that they've got on there, including that big terrifying hag looking thing at the end. That is the apothecary, but you can see the aesthetic as we go through this. So this is the prime example of what the style of the team is. They've got that Skyrim helmets, they've got this bronze, brass, leather studded style armor, they've got kind of hide put together to be their clothes, they've got fur lining. It looks rather chilly, shall we say, but they've got a decent amount of like bulk and armor to them. There's no unnecessary cartoony aesthetic. There's no anime body image, shall we say. This is just a team of female Blood Bowl players who fit the aesthetic nicely. So these are some of the blitzers. The blitzers are marked with the fancy helmet heads, which works brilliantly. And then you've got a big selection of linewomen. Now immediately you'll see that actually the style is tall. Okay, they are tall. Now they're tall and they are thin, essentially. They're not as sort of slender as what we saw out of WA Games High Elf team, but they are slighter than you'd expect, which is interesting when it comes to 3D printing them. I don't think I had a single fail. I did, because of the wings, and that's my fault, of the helmet of the thrower, and we'll go through and have a look. But they are thinner than you would imagine. They don't have that upper bulk, but actually that fits in with the aesthetic. So the thrower, and these are the 2 catchers. They are awesome models. There's a ton of great detail in the faces. Got to watch the helmet of the thrower though. I use the hot water trick, so I'll print my models, I'll give them an IPA swill, I'll chuck them in hot water, take off the supports, chuck them back in the IPA, a different IPA, and just clean it up. You got to be careful when taking off supports with thin pieces if you've heated it, because it can become quite fragile and you can lose pieces. But again, you can just see an absolute ton of character has gone into these sculpts. There's a bunch of different variety, and then you've got the terrifying apothecary too. So let's move on and have a look at the STLs themselves. So the first ones we'll have a look at are all 4 of the blitzers, and immediately you'll see that they are fully supported, but they are fully supported flat. Now, I thought that was going to be an issue because of the way you 3D print, because of the way 3D printing works. And if you're not familiar with 3D printing, it goes together very similarly to the old 3D puzzles, the old 3D sculptures that you used to get in the 2000s, like of the classic pyramids and things. But if I bring down the layering, you can see, and how it prints is it starts with the base plate and it just prints layer by layer by layer by layer by layer. Okay, so that's how it works. It works every single layer up. Now what that can mean is at certain points that you can see rings. Now this is what we'll see in some of the even on the upper ends of 3D printed stuff, some of the Greeblood, which is just really well done. At a certain angle you will see some rings that look very much like you know, like you cut a tree in half. You can just see these little rings, and that's caused by the layering. So having the models like this laid flat means that you are printing basically back upwards, and you do risk having some of those rings. But I don't think I saw any rings on the models themselves, so actually not a problem. The pre-supports were perfect. Now there's kind of two benefits here of printing this way. One is because you have a lower height, okay, because the height isn't very long, it does not take long to print this, okay, because this is only like an inch high all in all, which means you can get a print done in, I don't know, a couple of hours with the Mars 2 Pro, and probably even less with some of the newer ones. Now the downside is that because they're flat, they take up more space on the plate. So you might need 2 plates to print an entire team, but overall it will take the same amount of time as if you printed your entire team kind of at a 45-degree vertical angle. As you can see, height-wise, much bigger, but you can fit more players on the plate. Doesn't really matter because these ones are pre-supported, and they're pre-supported well at a pretty decent flat rate. Here we go, but you can see the sculpts. Now, we've seen them, and this is the cool thing about the way Torchlight do it, is they've got just pictures of the sculpts themselves, but if we get in a little bit closer, you can see all the detail that they've got on there. They've got all the bumps on the armor. I think for me, something that you see on both of the Torchlight teams that we've looked at where they've had heavy armor elements, you've got this what's the word I'm looking for, this texture that kind of looks like beaten metal, and they did this to a great standard on one of, if not both of their other teams as well, and it's a really cool effect that means that when you chuck contrast paint on it, actually comes up quite nicely. And these models here, and you'll see for the two that I started painting, started with a big coat of brown contrast, and it's brought up an absolute ton of the details. And you can see the sculpts come complete with teeth, and you've got bits of fur that you can see. Now what we'll do is we'll have a quick look at the underside, because one thing you've got to be careful of is where the points are impacting when it comes to the supports. Now it's always quite beneficial for you to be able to support it yourself if you want to, but again, they've done a really good job with these, and even though there's a couple of pock marks, there's not a lot, which is pretty impressive. So one thing we'll have a look at is, because the only model that I had any kind of a problem with was the thrower, and I don't think this has got anything to do with the way it was pre-supported, but to do with the fact that I wasn't paying attention. So thrower, really cool model, again same detail, brilliant sculpting. Watch out for the bloomin' flappy things on the side of the helmets. This is just a massive problem when it comes to any model, because they are quite thin, and as you can see, depth wise they're the same thickness as the supports themselves. So if you are doing this model, the thrower model, which is a pretty cool model, you're going to want this on your team. Maybe leave those supports on, let it dry, or just be really careful. Maybe take some snipe nose, some snippers, and just get that done instead of trying to wiggle your way off. If you peel the supports off, which is one of the most satisfying points of 3D printing, you may end up whipping the eagle helmet flaps off as well, which is going to be a bit disappointing. But I believe that was the only fail I had, and I printed every single one of these dudes. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the sculpts. So this one here is one of the blitzers, and I've printed it at 100% scale. So this is exactly as the STL comes. So I mean, can we get a nice shot of the detail there? We can get a little bit of the shine where I haven't maybe cleaned it as much as I should have done, but that is down to me being a cowboy, and nothing against the sculpts. As we have a look at the model, you can see all the details come up really nicely, and again, this has been printed on my Mars 2 Pro, standard settings, standard resin. You can see that there's plenty of detail. Now the only bit that's a little bit flat is this, that looks flat with a pure print. And this is the cool thing about this, is the fur when the fur takes a bit of a contrast paint, you get a bit of paint on there, it comes up perfectly. Now, we want to have a look at the back of this model, because that is where the majority, well, as you guys would have seen already from looking at the STLs, the majority of the supports have been, and I don't think you can see very many potholes, very many support issues where we've taken this model off the printer. So actually, the fact it's been printed flat like this has caused no rings, and the supports have basically left no issues on the model. So I am personally really happy with that. Let's have a look at scale before we move on and look at the other models. And the reason for that is because when I put these on the plate, I thought, ooh, they're quite tall. And you know what? They are quite tall. When it comes to looking at the scale of these models, they are gigantic at 100% scale. So when you look at the sculpts, when you look at the style, you can tell that actually they've got a big bit of, you know, height to them. They are quite slender. It is probably the best way to say it. They've got a lot of tallness. And when you put them against a nobility thrower, you can see that they are head and shoulders above. So I thought, all right, no worries. We'll print them at 90% scale. And that is exactly what I did. So 90% scale for these models lines up way better. So 90% with the supports that come on this model, and all of the other models we're going to have a look at, including the ones I painted up, are 90% scale. So this is another one of the models. This is one of the line women, and you can see all the details come up, and at 90% it's absolutely perfect. From a height standpoint, you know, next to a Black Orc, they're taller than a Black Orc, they're way smaller than a Black Orc. When they are lined up against a strength 2 Goblin, they've got plenty of height and plenty of mass against them too. So 90% for these lines them up nicely with the rest of Blood Boulder. So one of the only ones I had problems with was the thrower model, and that was probably down to me and the way I take supports off. I hadn't considered it. Whenever you're taking supports off a model, please just have a look at the model itself and consider what you were doing. I didn't, and it cost me one of the feathers on the helmet. But I mean, the model is a really cool pose. They did a nice job there, just making these models look quite light, but still have plenty of armor on them. Now, all the detail carried through, including like the leather work underneath the breastplate there as well. And I've been really impressed with all the different poses. They've done a good job here of putting actually something to glue the model onto the base with. And you can see some of the support works I haven't taken off yet. What I tend to do is just take a quick, especially for this series, I'll take them off nice and quickly just to wash them up so I can have a look at the models, have a look at the scale, because there's a couple of times where I've had to print, where I've printed an entire team out and then ended up having to reprint the entire team at the correct scale. But for this one, I could tell by looking at the tool model how tall it was, because it was quite massive actually. In fact, let's take the 100% scale piece. I mean, taller than an ogre, but way slighter. So that was quite an interesting one. But I have started painting, but not finished. Started painting a couple of the models, and you can see just with a nice bit of contrast there, I used contrast brown, and then I started adding bronze to some of the armor. I got my first coat of flesh on there. You can look, I mean, look, this contrast brown is amazing. You can see all the details have come up really nicely. Even on this fur element here, where I was quite worried that the detail was quite shallow, one bit of contrast there, and all I'm going to do is just basically dry brush up another color on top. I really like these, and it works really well for an Amazon team. And this is kind of the signpost model, and I had to get some paint on her as well. Now again, not had a chance to finish them off, but that initial contrast did a great job of picking up all the details, and then I could go in and block all the extra bits that I want, and then just flesh it out. But I mean, again, these are out at Asgard Rising bases because that's just the easiest ones I found to print out. And when you compare the model fully based to a nobility thrower, whether it's from a size, like from a mass point of view, or a height point of view, I think it works really well. So 90% scale for these. They print out beautifully, and they take contrast excellently as well. And there you have it, the Torchlight Amazon team, the Field Maidens. So scale wise, 90% scale will get their height in line with the rest of Blood Bowl. Otherwise, the team is perfect. So if you're looking for an Amazon team, you're waiting for Games Workshop to release it, you've got access to a 3D printer, back the Torchlight tribes on my mini factory, pretty low value, you get a whole team. This is their third team now, and they've all been really good. They get better with each event. The orcs they're doing next month look insanely cool. I'm super excited for that. But to summarize this team, 90% scale, and honestly, contrast paint will do the rest. They've done a great job with the details. I love the style. It's really cool, and it's great to see a kind of a fledgling company onto the Blood Bowl team, onto the Blood Bowl scene, produce some really good Blood Bowl teams. So really happy with that. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up. Let me know what you think of the Torchlight team, and if there's any other 3D prints you want me to have a look at out there. Otherwise, I'll let you go and have a lovely evening. The sunshine is out in England again, and we're not quite sure what to do about it. And I think the best thing to do is play Blood Bowl in the garden. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. We'll be back soon with more Blood Bowl content. Happy printing. Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to help support the channel even further, please like and subscribe, or come join us on our Patreon. We have early access to content. We get loads of feedback from you guys, and we try and do competitions as much as we can. Or you can get yourself some Bonehead podcast merch on our Spreadshirt site. So if you want to support a team, especially for the Bonehead Championship, you can pick up a shirt, a mug, things like that. It all helps support the channel, and we really appreciate it. Anyway, links below. Thank you very much. Happy blocking.